The silence in space was broken by something no human had ever heard before. A signal came rushing through the darkness like lightning, hitting the receivers at Luna Station with desperate urgency. The sound made everyone in the communication room freeze where they stood. Commander Jack Reed had been running Luna Station for 8 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The massive screens around him lit up with strange symbols and patterns that seemed to dance and shift. His team worked frantically to decode what looked like the most important message in human history. "Commander, I think we're getting pictures now," said Lisa Park, the station's best technician. Her hands moved quickly over the glowing controls, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air in the room. The excitement and fear in her voice was impossible to miss. What appeared on the main screen made grown soldiers gasp and step backward. The images were clearer than any movie, more terrifying than any nightmare. Ships the size of entire cities moved through space like living things, covered in what looked like skin and pulsing veins. These massive creatures were attacking planets, not just conquering them but completely destroying everything alive. The camera view switched to show billions of alien beings running for their lives. Their ships looked fragile and primitive compared to the monsters chasing them. Families were torn apart as tentacles longer than skyscrapers reached out from the bioships, grabbing everything in sight. Entire civilizations were being wiped out in hours. "This can't be real," whispered Tom Bradley, one of Reed's most trusted officers. But the data flowing across his screen proved otherwise. These weren't special effects or some kind of joke. This was actually happening somewhere out in the galaxy. The translation software finally cracked the alien language, and words began appearing on screen. Reed read them aloud, his voice growing more serious with each sentence. "We are the Galactic Council. For 200 years, we have avoided contact with your species. But now we have no choice. We need your help." The message continued with details that made Reed's blood run cold. The enemy was called the Hive, and they had already destroyed 17 different civilizations. Their ships were alive, growing and healing from damage almost instantly. They consumed everything in their path, leaving nothing but empty, dead worlds behind them. Tom pulled up more data, shaking his head in disbelief. "Look at this, Commander. The aliens tried everything they had. Energy weapons, plasma cannons, force fields, nothing worked. These hive creatures just adapted to everything thrown at them." The tactical reports showed battle after battle where alien fleets were completely destroyed. Ships that had ruled space for centuries were torn apart like paper toys. The most advanced weapons the galaxy could produce barely left scratches on the enemy's living armor. Reed watched video footage of an alien admiral giving what looked like a final message before his ship was consumed. The creature's face showed the same desperation Reed had seen in human soldiers during Earth's worst wars. This wasn't some distant conflict anymore, this was about survival. "They've tried everything, sir," Lisa said quietly. "Every weapon, every strategy, every alliance they could form. Nothing stopped these things. They're asking us because they literally have nowhere else to turn." The message ended with coordinates and a simple request that carried the weight of entire civilizations. The Galactic Council was begging Earth for military assistance. They admitted they knew almost nothing about humans except that we came from what they called a death world, a planet so dangerous that most species couldn't survive there. Reed understood what that meant. Earth had created humans through millions of years of competition, survival, and warfare. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved in peaceful environments. They had never learned to fight the way humans had been forced to fight just to survive. Looking around the room at his team, Reed saw the same realization dawning on their faces. Humanity had spent centuries learning to wage war against itself. Every conflict, every battle, every weapon ever created had been tested against other humans who fought back with equal intelligence and determination. The aliens had never faced anything like that before. Their enemies had always been less advanced, less organized, or less determined. But the Hive was different, and now both the Hive and the aliens were about to meet something neither of them expected. Reed walked to the communication console and opened a direct channel to Earth Command. His voice was steady, but everyone could hear the weight of history in his words. "Get me Admiral Jackson immediately. Tell her it's not a drill this time. The galaxy needs the fleet, and we're the only ones who can answer the call." The room fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of space traffic around Luna Station. Everyone understood that everything was about to change. Humanity's long isolation was over, and the universe was about to discover what happens when you wake up a planet full of apex predators. Admiral Kate Jackson stood at the massive windows of her office on Luna Station, staring out at the dormant fleet that stretched beyond the horizon. 200 warships floated in perfect formation, their hulls dark and cold like sleeping giants. For 15 years, she had prayed she would never have to wake them up again. The Sol Defense Fleet had been humanity's greatest achievement and its greatest shame. Built during the darkest period of human expansion, when Mars colonies fought Earth corporations and asteroid miners battled corporate security forces, these ships represented everything humans could accomplish when they focused their intelligence on destruction. The fleet had ended those conflicts through sheer overwhelming power, bringing peace to human space through strength that no one dared challenge. But peace had come at a cost. The politicians had decided that such devastating military power was too dangerous to keep active. The ships were mothballed, their crews reassigned, their weapons systems powered down. Jackson had been promoted to admiral of a fleet that existed only on paper, watching over sleeping monsters that she hoped would never need to hunt again. Now everything was about to change. The emergency call from Commander Reed had arrived just 2 hours ago, and already the massive hangars were buzzing with activity. Thousands of technicians swarmed over the ships like ants, bringing systems online that had been dormant for years. The sound of engines warming up echoed through the station as humanity prepared for its first real war in decades. Jackson walked onto the bridge of the UES Retribution, her flagship and the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. The bridge was a masterpiece of military engineering, with tactical displays that could track thousands of targets simultaneously and weapons controls that could coordinate devastating attacks across entire solar systems. Captain Dave Morrison looked up from the communications console where green lights were blinking rapidly. "Admiral, we have an incoming message from Earth Command. Priority Alpha clearance." The air above the command table shimmered and formed the familiar face of General Robert Hayes, Jackson's old friend and the highest-ranking military officer in human space. His expression was serious, but she could see the excitement in his eyes. After years of peacekeeping and diplomatic missions, they finally had a real fight on their hands. "Kate, I know this is happening fast, but we don't have time for the usual procedures. The politicians down here are still arguing about first contact protocols and diplomatic immunity. Meanwhile, entire civilizations are being wiped out while they debate proper etiquette." Jackson nodded, understanding the situation perfectly. Earth's government had spent decades creating complex rules about how to handle contact with alien species. They had committees and subcommittees and legal frameworks for every possible scenario except the one they were actually facing. Sometimes action was more important than procedure. "What are my orders, Bob?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Full operational authority. Take the fleet, find these hive creatures, and stop them using whatever methods you see fit. The gloves are off, Kate. Show them what humans can do when we stop holding back." Captain Amy Foster, the fleet's tactical specialist, had been studying the alien combat footage since it arrived. She pulled up holographic displays showing the bioships in action, their organic hulls pulsing with strange energy as they tore through alien defenses. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their combat capabilities. These creatures have never faced kinetic weapons. Look at their armor, it's designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks. Plasma, lasers, particle beams, they can handle all of that. But they have no protection against solid projectiles." Jackson studied the tactical data with growing confidence. The alien fleets had been using the same basic weapons for thousands of years. Energy shields, plasma cannons, and force fields were elegant and clean, the kind of weapons civilized species developed when they had time to perfect their technology over peaceful centuries. Humans had never had that luxury. Earth had forced them to develop weapons that were crude, brutal, and devastatingly effective. Rail guns that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles that could crack continents. Kinetic bombardment systems that turned simple rocks into planet-killing weapons. Every human weapon had been tested against other humans who were just as smart and just as determined to win. These bioships adapt to energy weapons, Foster continued, but they've never seen anything like our arsenal. A simple steel core projectile traveling at 12% of light speed will punch through their hulls like they're made of paper. Jackson felt a cold smile cross her face. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world. It wasn't just because of the dangerous environment or the predatory wildlife. It was because Earth had produced a species that turned warfare into an art form. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, and her voice reached every ship simultaneously. All vessels, this is Admiral Jackson. We launch in 30 minutes. I want every weapon system online and every crew at battle stations. Today we're not just representing Earth, we're showing the galaxy what happens when someone threatens innocent people and wakes up humanity. The response was immediate. Across the fleet, engines that had been cold for 15 years roared to life. Weapon systems that could level cities charged up with deadly energy. 200 warships prepared for battle, each one crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Jackson watched the tactical display as her ships formed into attack formations. The jump drives were spinning up, ready to tear holes in spacetime itself. In minutes, the sole defense fleet would disappear from human space and reappear in the middle of an alien war zone. The Hive had never encountered anything like humanity before. They were about to learn why some species should never be awakened from their peaceful sleep. The jump drive shut down with a deep rumble that shook every ship in the human fleet. Admiral Jackson felt the familiar sensation of returning to normal space as the stars shifted back into their proper positions. Around her, the bridge crew worked quickly to assess their new surroundings, but what they found made everyone freeze in shock. Commander Nick Thompson stared at his tactical display aboard the UES Vengeance, his voice barely a whisper. "Admiral, you need to see this. There are at least 50 of those bioships surrounding the fourth planet, and they're not just attacking it. They're eating it." The main screen filled with an image that would haunt every human who saw it. The planet below was dying, its surface stripped away layer by layer as massive organic ships fed on everything they could reach. What had once been a living world with cities and forests was becoming nothing but bare rock. The bioships moved like giant parasites, their hulls pulsing with veins of sickly green light as they consumed an entire civilization. Smaller creatures swarmed around the main ships like insects around a carcass. These fighter-sized organisms were chasing down civilian vessels that were trying to escape the system. Jackson watched in horror as tentacles reached out from the biofighters, grabbing refugee ships and pulling them inside to be digested alive. "How many survivors are we looking at?" Jackson asked, though she dreaded the answer. Lieutenant Kelly Martinez worked frantically at her sensor station. "I'm reading at least 2 million alien civilians in those escaped ships, Admiral. But the Hive creatures are picking them off one by one. At this rate, they'll all be dead within the hour." Jackson had seen enough. This wasn't a military engagement or a territorial dispute. This was genocide on a scale that made humanity's worst conflicts look like minor disagreements. The Hive wasn't just conquering other species, they were completely erasing them from existence. She opened communications to every ship in the human fleet. Her voice was calm and cold, the tone of someone who had made a decision that couldn't be changed. "All vessels, this is Admiral Jackson. We have a clear view of the enemy and confirmation of hostile actions against civilian targets. You are weapons free. Show them what happens when they threaten innocent people." The response was immediate and devastating. 200 human warships opened fire simultaneously, their weapons systems unleashing destruction that the galaxy had never seen before. Rail guns fired solid metal projectiles at speeds that turned them into pure kinetic energy. The slugs hit the bioships with the force of small meteors, punching through their organic hulls and tearing massive holes in their bodies. Nuclear-tipped torpedoes streaked through space like miniature suns, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city. When they detonated against the bioships, the creatures' adaptive armor meant nothing. The raw atomic fire vaporized everything it touched, turning living vessels the size of skyscrapers into clouds of superheated plasma. The Hive had never encountered weapons like these. Their evolution had been shaped by millions of years of fighting species that used energy-based technology. They could absorb plasma attacks, redirect laser fire, and adapt to particle beams. But they had no defense against simple chunks of metal fired at incredible speeds, or the raw destructive power of nuclear fusion. Commander Thompson watched his targeting display as enemy ships disappeared one after another. Direct hit on the largest bioship. Hull breach detected. It's breaking apart. The Hive creatures tried to respond, but their weapons were useless against human technology. Energy beams that could slice through alien armor bounced harmlessly off human shield generators. Bioplasma that could melt other ships' hulls was absorbed and redirected by human defensive systems. Some of the smaller Hive organisms attempted to board the human vessels, using the same tactics that had worked against other species. Lieutenant Martinez detected them first as they attached themselves to the hull of the UES Devastator. "Admiral, we have boarding attempts on multiple ships. The creatures are trying to break through our airlocks." Jackson's response was swift and merciless. "All ships with boarding attempts, release the Marines. Show these things what close combat really means." Sergeant Mike Collins had been waiting for this moment since the fleet launched. He led his assault team through the ship's corridors, their powered armor making them look like walking tanks. When the Hive creatures finally broke through the airlock, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. The aliens were used to fighting species that relied on energy weapons and psychic abilities for personal combat. They had never faced opponents who carried automatic rifles loaded with armor-piercing rounds. The sound of gunfire echoed through the ship's corridors as human Marines methodically eliminated every boarding creature. Collins' team moved with precision that came from years of training against human opponents. They used tactics that had been developed in Earth's bloodiest conflicts, adapted for fighting in the confined spaces of a starship. The Hive creatures, despite their biological advantages, were completely overwhelmed by human military doctrine. "Boarding threat neutralized," Collins reported over the comm system. "These things don't know how to fight against projectile weapons." It was like shooting fish in a barrel. The battle lasted 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human fleet systematically destroyed or disabled every Hive vessel in the system. When the surviving bioships tried to retreat, Jackson made a decision that would define humanity's reputation in the galaxy. "Let them go," she ordered. "But make sure they understand what happened here today." Instead of pursuing the fleeing Hive ships, the human fleet immediately turned to rescue operations. Every available transport began collecting alien survivors from the refugee vessels, providing medical aid and emergency supplies to beings they had never seen before. Captain Amy Foster studied the tactical results with professional satisfaction. 63 enemy vessels eliminated or driven off. Estimated 2 million civilian lives saved. Human casualties, 0. Jackson nodded as she watched human medics working alongside alien doctors to treat the wounded. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the Sol Defense Fleet has arrived, and we're here to help. Also tell them that the Hive just learned why you should never threaten innocent people when humans are watching." The galaxy's first contact with humanity hadn't been through diplomacy or cultural exchange. It had been through the raw demonstration of human military power unleashed in defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. The message was clear: Earth had joined the galactic community, and the rules of warfare had just changed forever. 3 weeks had passed since humanity's first encounter with the Hive, and the galaxy would never be the same. Reports of the human victory at Kepler 442 had spread across every inhabited system like wildfire. Species that had cowered in fear for months were suddenly talking about hope again. The humans had done something no one thought possible, they had made the hive retreat. Admiral Jackson stood in the war room of the UES Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the current state of the galactic conflict. Her senior staff worked around the massive table, analyzing data streams from across known space. The three-dimensional star map floating above them painted a picture that was both encouraging and terrifying. Colonel Steve Peterson, the fleet's intelligence specialist, pointed to several glowing red markers moving through the map. "Admiral, our long-range scouts have tracked the main hive forces. They're not running in panic like we hoped. They're making a strategic withdrawal toward the galactic core, probably heading back to their homeworld to regroup." The implication was clear to everyone in the room. The hive had been surprised by humanity's tactics, but they weren't defeated. If given time to adapt and rebuild, they would return stronger and more prepared for human weapons. Captain Morrison manipulated the star map, highlighting dozens of smaller red dots scattered across the galaxy. "The real problem is what they left behind. Intelligence reports confirm active hive breeding colonies on at least 40 planets. These aren't just military outposts, they're reproduction centers designed to create new bioships and warrior organisms." Jackson studied the data with growing concern. Each breeding colony represented millions of future hive creatures that could mature within a few years. The mathematics were simple and horrifying. If these colonies were allowed to develop, the next hive invasion would be 10 times larger than the first. Commander Jennifer Walsh, Jackson's strategic advisor, pulled up reports from the Galactic Council. Her expression showed the frustration that had been building since humanity joined the galactic community. "Admiral, I've been in constant communication with Council leadership about our next moves. They're requesting that we limit our attacks to precision strikes against military targets only." "Precision strikes," Jackson repeated, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "The same tactics that got 17 civilizations completely wiped out." Walsh nodded reluctantly. "They're concerned about what they call excessive force. The Council believes that large-scale bombardment goes against civilized warfare principles. They want surgical removal of hive forces with minimal damage to planetary ecosystems." Jackson looked around the war room at her officers, seeing the same thoughts reflected on every face. The Galactic Council had spent centuries developing rules of engagement that assumed their enemies would follow similar ethical guidelines. They fought wars like gentlemen's duels, with honor and restraint and careful consideration for collateral damage. The hive didn't care about honor or restraint. They consumed entire worlds and turned living beings into food. While the Council debated proper military etiquette, billions more innocent people were dying. "How long do our experts estimate it would take to eliminate all breeding colonies using surgical strikes?" Jackson asked. Peterson ran the calculations quickly. "Conservative estimate, 18 months to 2 years, assuming perfect conditions and no resistance. Realistically, 3 to 4 years. And how long before those colonies mature enough to launch a new invasion?" 8 to 10 months, Admiral." The silence in the war room was heavy with the weight of impossible mathematics. The Council's preferred approach would guarantee the complete success of the next hive assault. Entire species would be extinct before human forces could eliminate half the breeding colonies. Jackson walked to the communication console and activated the galaxy-wide broadcast system. Her decision was made, and she wanted everyone to understand exactly what was about to happen. "This is Admiral Kate Jackson of the Human Defense Fleet, broadcasting on all Galactic Council frequencies. I am addressing all hive forces currently occupying this galaxy." Across hundreds of worlds, alien leaders gathered around viewscreens to watch humanity's first official diplomatic communication. Jackson's image appeared simultaneously on council chambers, military command centers, and civilian news networks. "You have 48 hours to completely withdraw from this galaxy or surrender unconditionally. If you choose neither option, humanity will demonstrate why Earth is classified as a Class XII death world. We will show you what happens when a species evolves through 4 billion years of survival warfare." The response came faster than anyone expected. 6 hours after Jackson's broadcast, every telepathic species in the galaxy received the same message. The Hive Queen's psychic scream of rage and defiance was so powerful that alien mind readers across dozens of systems collapsed in agony. Several had to be hospitalized with severe neural trauma. Captain Amy Foster couldn't help but smile grimly as medical reports flooded in. "I think we can safely assume they're not interested in peaceful negotiations." Jackson nodded to Commander Ryan Clark, her weapons specialist. "All ships are to implement Operation Deathworld immediately. Target every confirmed hive breeding colony for complete kinetic bombardment. I want nothing left but empty craters." The human fleet began splitting into smaller groups, each one assigned to eliminate multiple breeding colonies. These weren't exploratory missions or rescue operations. This was extermination warfare, the kind of total conflict that Earth had perfected during its bloodiest periods. Clark pulled up targeting solutions that would have horrified the Galactic Council. "Admiral, we're looking at planetary bombardment on a scale never seen in recorded galactic history. Some of these colonies are built into the planet's crusts. We'll need to crack the surface to reach them." "Then crack the surface," Jackson replied without hesitation. The galaxy tried doing this the civilized way for months, and the result was genocide. Sometimes mercy toward your enemies is cruelty toward everyone else. The human approach to warfare had been shaped by fighting against other humans for millions of years. Every strategy, every weapon, every tactical doctrine had been tested against opponents who were just as intelligent and resourceful as themselves. They had learned that in a fight for survival, half measures were just another way to lose. As the human hunting fleets prepared to jump to their assigned targets, Jackson made one final broadcast to the galaxy. "To all species watching these events, humanity doesn't enjoy what we're about to do. But we've learned from our own history that evil must be stopped completely, or it will return stronger than before. We're willing to carry this burden so that your children can live in peace." The message ended, and 200 human warships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying enough destructive power to reshape entire solar systems. The galaxy was about to witness the full military might of a species that had turned warfare into a science, practiced on a world where only the strongest survived. 6 months of relentless hunting had led to this moment. The human fleet had systematically eliminated every hive breeding colony across the galaxy, leaving behind nothing but empty craters where once thriving alien reproduction centers had pulsed with life. Now, in the Vegas sector, the last remnant of the hive invasion force had gathered around their queen for one final desperate battle. Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, staring at the massive bioship that dominated the viewscreen. The Queen's vessel was unlike anything humanity had encountered before, a living fortress the size of a small moon, its surface writhing with defensive creatures that moved like antibodies protecting a massive organism. Smaller bioships orbited around it like planets around a star, creating a defensive formation that had never been breached by any galactic military. Around Jackson, her command staff worked with the focused intensity that had become their trademark over months of warfare. But today was different. Today, representatives from every major species in the galaxy watched through holographic projection, witnessing what everyone hoped would be the final chapter of the Hive War. The alien dignitaries had been skeptical when they first arrived. The Zephyrians, who had sent the original distress call, could barely believe that their primitive energy weapons had been replaced by human kinetic bombardment systems. The crystalline Vortons, whose civilization was thousands of years older than humanity, struggled to understand how a species so young could wage war so effectively. Lieutenant Daniel Brooks, monitoring communications from his position at the sensor array, suddenly looked up with alarm. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Queen herself. She's trying to establish direct contact." Jackson nodded grimly. She had expected this. Every cornered predator eventually tried negotiation when brute force failed. "Put her through on all channels. I want everyone in the galaxy to hear this." The voice that filled the bridge was ancient beyond human comprehension, carrying the weight of millions of years of conquest and consumption. When the Queen spoke, her words seemed to bypass normal hearing and strike directly at the primitive parts of the brain that remembered what it felt like to be prey. "Deathworlders," the Queen hissed, the word carrying both respect and hatred. "You have proven yourselves worthy adversaries. We offer you a place in the eternal feast. Join with us, accept our genetic gifts, and together we will consume all the lesser species that clutter this galaxy." The offer hung in the air like poison. Around the galaxy, alien leaders held their breath, wondering how humanity would respond to the ultimate temptation, the chance to join the strongest side and avoid destruction. Jackson's response was immediate and broadcast across every inhabited system. "We've already achieved perfection, Queen. We learned something you never could, the strength to choose when not to kill." The silence that followed was broken only by the Queen's shriek of rage, a sound that made several alien observers step back in fear. But Jackson had already moved past negotiation. She opened fleet communications with the calm efficiency that had become her signature. "All ships, implement final assault pattern. Today we finish what the galaxy started months ago. Let's send these creatures back to whatever dark corner of space they came from." The human fleet moved with precision that amazed the watching aliens. 200 warships arranged themselves in a three-dimensional formation that surrounded the Queen's bioship completely, eliminating any possibility of escape. Every vessel locked onto specific targets, their weapon systems charged and ready. Captain Brian Turner had volunteered to lead the boarding action that everyone knew would be necessary. The Queen's ship was too massive to destroy with external weapons alone. Someone would have to go inside and eliminate the central intelligence that controlled the entire Hive network. Turner's assault team was composed of humanity's most experienced soldiers, veterans of conflicts that had prepared them for fighting in environments no other species could imagine. They wore powered armor that could survive in the vacuum of space and carried weapons designed to function in zero-gravity, poisonous atmospheres, and extreme temperatures. The boarding pods launched from multiple human ships simultaneously, their armored hulls designed to punch through the bioship's defensive membrane. Turner watched through his helmet display as the organic surface of the Queen's vessel rushed toward them, covered with creatures that looked like living weapons. Inside the bioship, the human marines encountered horrors that would have driven other species insane. The corridors pulsed like arteries, the walls were covered with sensory organs that tracked their movement, and the air was thick with spores designed to paralyze intruders. But Turner's team moved through it all with methodical determination, their weapons cutting through biomechanical defenders that had never faced projectile weapons. The fighting was brutal and efficient. Human soldiers had trained for urban warfare in Earth's most dangerous cities, for tunnel fighting in asteroid mines, and for ship-to-ship combat in the vacuum of space. Every lesson learned from humanity's violent history was applied with deadly precision. When Turner's team finally reached the Queen's chamber, they found a creature that defied description, part plant, part animal, part machine, larger than most buildings and pulsing with malevolent intelligence. The Queen's death took 17 minutes of concentrated firepower, but when she finally fell, her dying scream echoed across subspace like the end of a nightmare. Across the galaxy, every remaining Hive creature collapsed simultaneously. The psychic network that had controlled their actions for millions of years went silent, leaving behind only empty bioships drifting through space like abandoned shells. In the aftermath, as human vessels coordinated rescue operations for the alien survivors found in the Queen's ship, the Galactic Council made an unprecedented offer. The holographic representative of the Council's High Chamber appeared on Jackson's bridge, his ancient face showing respect that few species had ever earned. "Admiral Jackson, on behalf of all civilized species in the galaxy, we formally invite humanity to join the Galactic Council as full members. Your actions have saved countless lives and demonstrated that Earth deserves a place among the galaxy's leaders." Jackson's response surprised everyone watching. "We're honored by the offer, Council Leader, but humanity prefers to maintain its independence. We've learned that the best way to protect others is to remain free to act when action is necessary." She paused, looking at the tactical display that still showed human ships spread across the galaxy. "However, if the galaxy ever faces another threat like the Hive, you know how to contact us. We'll be watching from Sol, ready to help when innocent people need protection. As the human fleet prepared for the long journey home, something remarkable was already happening across the galaxy. On worlds that had never heard of Earth before the Hive War, children were learning new stories. They spoke of the Terran protectors who lived in the darkness between stars, waiting for the call to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. The galaxy had learned that it was not alone. Somewhere out in the vast emptiness of space, a species of apex predators stood watch, ready to emerge whenever evil threatened the innocent. It was a comforting thought for parents tucking their children into bed, knowing that if the darkness ever returned, humanity would be there to hold it back. Earth had joined the galactic community not through diplomacy or trade agreements, but through the simple demonstration that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost.